Um, so today, I am currently between jobs. I was formerly at the FDA, and then got another little stint this summer and chose to resign, again due to the political climate. But I have a background in government, industry, and a little in academia, and I'll pass it to Andy.
Yeah. So I'm Andy Woodward. I use she and they pronouns, and I live in Atlanta, and I'm the pastor of Neighborhood Church. I am a graduate of Oxford College, class of '99, Emory College, class of 2001, and the Candler School of Theology, class of 2007. There's a whole bunch of my wall that's taken up by pieces of paper from Emory. I'm a elder in full connection in the United Methodist Church. So I've served various congregations in the United Methodist Church in North Georgia since 2009. And I'm currently at Neighborhood Church, which is in the Candler Park neighborhood of Atlanta, a congregation that I helped to start in 2016. So we are in our 10th year, which is a pretty amazing thing to be a part of.
And
And yeah.
I'm Bill Brocious. I'm an '85 graduate of the Goizueta Business School. It was not called that when I graduated. It was called the Rich School of Business. And I worked as a hospital CFO for a number of years until I retired last year. I live in Dallas, Texas, but I'm currently in Santa Fe, New Mexico today. I do a lot of work with Emory. I joined the Goizueta Business School Alumni Association in 1998, became president in 2006, and then moved on to the Emory Alumni Association, where I was president from in the 2010-11 year, and then joined the board of trustees in 2016. And I've been on the board of trustees for 10 years now, and also on the Emory Healthcare Board of Directors and on the Patient Quality Committee of the Emory Healthcare Board of Directors, as well as the Children and Emory Pediatric Institute, which is a joint venture between CHOA in Atlanta and Emory Healthcare. So quite involved with Emory and since I really graduated in 1985.
Oh, awesome. So I guess to kick us off, one of the first questions I had for all of us is, what is your favorite thing about being out at work and your least favorite thing about being out at work? And I'll let either one of you jump in on that one.
Well, I can say that for the most part, I had good experiences. I will say, the in the beginning, which was in 1985 and 1989, through 1989, I was at a big aid accounting firm at the time, and it was very difficult to be gay in that time frame. It was kind of, for lack of a better term, a good old Atlanta boy network, and being gay was not you weren't out. No, I was not out then. And the
Mm,
people who were out typically would not get put on jobs. It was pretty obvious. So you kind of almost stayed in the closet. And then my favorite thing was later in life when I became the chief financial officer of a large hospital system in Houston. I was told by so many people how much they appreciated. I was openly out at work, and we're talking 2009 and 10 now,
mhm,
and that there was kind of like there was a role model, and I didn't feel like I was doing it because of that, but it was something that people who were gay, lesbian, and back then it was mostly just gay, lesbian, and bi, but we didn't have the transgender population back then, and so it was just a kind of a to be that person and to and just to be me and not the gay part wasn't but to be openly gay but not not that's not the primary reason that I was successful. You know, I was successful
Hmm.
because I did a good job. So
And what was your least favorite then?
my least favorite was in the initial with
Yeah.
when you couldn't be yourself. I actually one of the reasons I left Atlanta in 1989 is I had all these people and cohorts that I wasn't out in 1989. I said, well, let me move to Dallas to start my life new, you know, kind of
Hmm.
new and be able to not really know anybody and move to Dallas, Texas and kind of blossomed there. That's when I really started to come out and be myself.
Yeah. Andy?
So I'm going to start with the maybe the more negative parts first.
No.
And but they're interestingly linked for me. So I came out to myself really at the tail end of 2019, 2018, 2019,
Hmm.
and then started a sort of more private process of coming out to my family and all that kind of stuff, and started a medical transition
Hmm.
in January of 2020. And so, you know, the world sort of closed up for a while, and I was able to have a kind of private process. But then coming out became this like um, really tricky thing because so much of what we were doing wasn't in person, and
Hmm.
and and my person was changing, and so it was hard to like share more and more of myself as we were showing up on Zoom, or eventually showing up back in person. And so what has really unfolded is that there's not a lot of trans clergy, really, in the United States, and particularly not in my denomination. So, one of my least favorite parts of being out is that there's really, really very, very, very few people that are sort of in my same birds of my feather, so to speak.
Right.
Um, but I don't all the time mind that. I mean, what that means is that I celebrate anytime that I can connect with folks that are doing the same work, that share some of my experiences. And what is interesting to me is that, you know, we have an ordination process in
Hmm.
the denomination that I'm a part of, and there are a bunch of folks that are in the process, and so they're on the way towards ordination and the sort of security of that status. So that's interesting to me, and I want to be helpful and supportive however I
Okay.
can. And so that's really my favorite part of this, is that I'm one of the few that people know to come and find.
Hmm.
So I'm able to be that person, just to listen, to try to coach a little bit, to think through both like what personal and sort of psychological medical things might be happening, and also professional things might be happening, and to just help people talk through that. So I'm glad to be out there, even if there's not that many of us.
I like that a lot. And just to piggyback on what you guys said, I think for me, the least favorite over the years, especially early on, as Bill said, was the emotional labor of always having to either hide or come out. So there's an emotional labor in either. I think my favorite part is most recently, once you are in a leadership role, as you guys discussed, you do have that opportunity. The visibility alone is encouraging to all the other people who are around you. So I thought those were really good points. I think I'm going to jump around and ask something a little different, if you guys don't mind. That wasn't on the list. And this one is for Bill. So, Bill, given our current climate, I really like how you said you blossomed in Dallas, Texas, because a lot of people have opinions about different states now, right? And I think it just depends on who you are and where you are. And so, can you talk a little bit more about leaving Atlanta and having a clean slate and but blossoming in what people would historically see as another place that is difficult to do that?
Yeah, so when I didn't know this when I moved to Dallas, but Dallas was a very is probably one of the most cohesive gay communities in the country. Very, they all organizations work really well together, and I got involved with the Resource Center of Dallas in the early 90s, which was primarily assisting HIV patients. Um, and and Dallas, and I think Dallas is probably like any other big city. It's kind of the bubble in the state.
Hmm.
You know, it's not. It's more accepting. It's not like when we talk about opportunities. I've always been in a big city, and but if you live out in Lubbock or Amarillo or other parts of Texas, those are the parts that you hear about. You know, when people hear about Texas, I like to say like, you know, when it's 55-45, that's still, you know, it means most people, you know, are still, you know, and but it's not everybody. It's not like it's a huge disproportionate share. And I was lucky. I worked for a company that when I left Atlanta, the Big Eight firm, I went to work for a hospital system, and the hospital system had a very progressive leader, and was very easy for me to come out. He was
Hmm.
known for already supporting LGBTQ or pretty much gays and lesbians back then. Um, and so I didn't have that kind of fear of being out that I did when I was in Atlanta at Arthur.
Hmm.
Um, and did I answer the question? I feel like I'm rambling.
No, no, I think you did a good
So,
job. Sorry, I put you on the spot. I'll stick to the script a little bit more.
yeah, it's no, it's I mean,
I was just curious.
Dallas is a great place to live if you're an LGBTQ person, especially in this climate. You know, it's very protective, and
Hmm.
you don't know what's going to happen, you know, with the current climate. But you know, Dallas is almost, for lack of a better term, and I would say other big cities, Houston, Austin, San Antonio to some extent, and even El Paso to some extent, um, are more friendly cities in the state.
Okay, cool. And Andy, and I guess all of us on this call have a level of longevity in the workplace. So I think the next question I wanted to ask was, what changes have you seen in workplace inclusion over time? And I think some of you already hit a few of them, but what still needs to happen? Because I do think we've seen a lot of changes, but what do you think still needs to occur?
I'll jump in here. So, um, I'm a pastor in the United Methodist Church, and
Hmm.
I don't know how familiar everyone is with sort of our our interesting drama that we've had of late in our denomination. So, um, the short version, I won't get too wonky, but we had a global gathering of Methodist leaders in May of 2024, so just over a
Hmm.
year ago, that finally, after around 50 years, removed formal prohibitions against against L and G open folks serving as pastors or
Hmm.
performing same gender weddings. Um, for since 1972-ish, the United Methodist Church had formal prohibitions.
Hmm.
Um, because of the conversations these days, often we would categorize, talking about the LGBTQ plus community, but
Hmm.
technically in our formal language, it was um, L and G people and people who were in the B category who were in straight passing relationships often
Hmm.
didn't have problems. And because the language was written in 1972, there was no thought about trans folks at that point in the conversation, which is actually how I was able to come out to my bishop and to stay in my role. Was I came out to my bishop and said, I'm pretty sure that I'm not that gender, and I'm pretty sure that I'm this other thing, um, and she told me, there is no conversation in our formal rules about people of an expansive gender identity.
Hmm.
Um, that was interesting. But in just over a year ago, we've been able to make these changes. But
Hmm.
what has happened is that in the church space, we removed prohibitions, but we have not enacted protections. And
Mm.
so, and as I was mentioning earlier, there's a fair amount of folks who, for whatever reason, are feeling led to pursue ministry that would identify somewhere in the LGBTQ plus spectrum.
Hmm.
So that's part of our work now as a church, but particularly my congregation and some of the leaders in my congregation and elsewhere is to see how we can um, enact protections within our denominational systems, even as the rest of the world is sort of changing so rapidly in the other direction in many ways.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a great answer. So, so
Are you,
can,
are we
can you hear
stuck?
me though?
I can. What? Oh, I didn't realize. I thought that question was for Andy.
Oh, it's for anyone. If
Oh,
you don't
okay.
want to answer, that's fine too.
Yeah, yeah. You have to repeat it. You have to repeat it. I was listening to her
Oh
answer.
no, no, no. Yeah, she did a great job. It's I said, like over time we've seen more inclusion in the workplace, but what do you think, in your opinion, still needs to happen? Or what other changes do we need to
Well, I
occur?
think, like I said, in most of your in larger corporations and I think you've seen a lot of progress. I think where there's needs to be a lot more precision is in smaller communities where
Hmm.
you've got businesses and it hasn't it's where we've got equality in a lot of the places within the city, just because the people kind of demand it. But when you're out in a small town and you can't be out, or there's still a lot of work to do outside of the big cities in most of the states. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
whether it's a green or green, a blue or a red state, I mean, the smaller cities probably are all experiencing, people are all experiencing some discrimination.
Yeah, I feel like in my circles we have that conversation a lot as well, where we're saying, is my day-to-day safe, but my overall state policies may not be great? Or would I prefer my state policies to be great, but then my day-to-day is not excellent, right? And most people wish that their day-to-day was better. And versus, does this policy help me in this blue state or not? If I live in a very rural community. So yeah, points well taken. I really liked the enhanced protection comment that you made, Andy. It was excellent, excellent point. Um, and so then I guess, what has made you all feel supported or safe in a workplace environment, in your past, currently, and maybe in the future?
Well, I think with me, I would say I was pretty lucky with like my one ups or bosses, or even at the top of the chain. I mean, every place I've worked, pretty much since I left Atlanta, people who were accepting um, and supportive. And again, and with a lot of them, I guess I was lucky too, is because it wasn't they didn't like me because I was gay. They liked me because of the work I did and how I
Hmm.
performed. I just happened to be gay, and so and I think if you get people who can recognize that, you feel like you're in an accepting environment. You can perform, and I know everybody probably hasn't had that necessarily had that experience. My only really bad experience was early in my career, in when I was in Atlanta and working at an
Hmm.
accounting firm.
So I was able to help start my own congregation. So in some ways,
Hmm.
I helped to create a space that was going to be safe. What was interesting
Awesome.
is I had no inkling that I was trans when I started the church and had it be an affirming space and all that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. And lots of self discovery happened and unfolded. Um, and one of the things that we started saying in our worship services is all of who you are is welcome here. It
Mm,
just became sort of a mantra for us. And then over time, I realized I was saying that to myself, um,
mm,
that all of who I was welcome in that space. Um, so it was interesting that we had all these like stated values, like kind of made formal statements as a congregation that we were going to embrace all kinds of folks, not just on a LGBTQ spectrum level, but folks of all kinds of backgrounds, and to realize that me as the leader of this congregation was coming out would be in some ways a test
hmm
of our stated values. Um, but our crowd just surfed it. I mean, it really wasn't a big deal in my congregation. Um, and where I was the most anxious was going to broader denominational gatherings. Like we have an annual conference, which is like 3,000 folks in a room for the better part of a week.
mm,
We are all together in one space. Um, and I was nervous as all get out those first few years that some of our more traditionalist siblings would cause a stir, or there would somebody
hmm
grab me in a hallway and decide to tell me what they thought or whatever. And I actually asked a bunch of colleagues that are my friends, like I was like, I need like an entourage. Like I need your help, like to just go with me so that I'm not really alone. And
Yeah,
so many friends did that for me. Like
that was awesome.
I was never alone. And so it was these allies that helped me really navigate those first few years. And there were no incidents. And um, really, those folks have continued to be on my team. But it was these allies that were a part of my circle that helped me feel safe.
That's awesome. I'm not going to answer that question because I really want to ask the next one. So what do you wish your employers or your colleagues or even your family and friends understood about your LGBTQ plus identity in that workplace? Um, You know, what do you think about, what do you wish they understood more? I think you kind of hit a little bit of it, Andy, in the sense of you were anxious about being in that larger, broader gathering. But what do you think that those people, what do you wish they understood more about your identity?
So I will just full honesty here. I think that there is something about being the leader of something,
Mm,
some kind of official role, um, and being a part of a congregation or denomination that's made certain statements that I think if individuals have um, questions or they don't quite understand, I mean, there is so much conversation in my awareness about trans people, the trans experience, what it means to be trans,
hmm
um, that uh, not, I don't know what percentage to put on it, but a bunch of it is just like nowhere close to being
hmm
true or real. And we're demonized and we're
hmm
dehumanized and all these kinds of things in the public discourse. And so um, just on some level, I wish that I could find a way to say, like, if you have questions about who I am and what I'm experiencing, is there, I am open to to those conversations if they are made in good faith, right?
hmm
But also to be clear that there are resources that people can go and learn about, and then maybe come and ask those questions, I guess. What I'm really hoping for um, is to have my church and then certainly my broader denomination um, be so well versed in understanding folks of the whole LGBTQ experience, but particularly trans and non-binary folks these days.
hmm
Um, Not just because we have pastors or church members, um, but because the trans community is under threat.
hmm
And I believe that part of the role of the church is to stand up and stand with folks that are in a marginalized position. And so if we're going to do that, then we need to know and understand and be in relationship with. And so I want to empower my church to do that. Um,
Mhm.
and we're getting there, but
Yeah.
there's still a lot of I have an older woman friend that we go grocery shopping with, and I have no idea what she's going to say half the time, but that's part of the fun. But she's still asking questions, and that's really what I'm hoping for, in that kind of open conversational way. And what I hear from her most of the time is like, you know what? I don't always understand, but I love you, and I know you love me, and that's all that matters.
Yes. So, Bill, what do you wish your employers or colleagues understood more about your identity in the workplace?
Well, that's obviously changed quite a bit over the years
Uh,
since I started in the workforce 40 years ago in 1985. And, back then it was, not to be crude, sometimes you'd have a question like, "What do you do in bed?" And I'm like, "That's not on
mhm,
the table. Let's talk about, what I do at work." And you don't get that question anymore, that you used to get, back 40 years ago. Um, I, and again, I think I've been pretty lucky. I've had two of my bosses that I worked with and other cities used to come to the HRC dinner in Dallas,
nice.
which that was showed you how much they actually supported um, the LGBTQ community, even though they weren't part of that community. Um, what still could be done? I mean, I know there are organizations with affinity groups in them, or uh, that there might be an LGBTQ affinity group or an African American affinity group, and just like Emory has with the impact circles that
Mhm,
Dominique was talking about. Just to continue to promote those types of groups and um, allow them to flourish. And it's trying times. I mean, as many of you know, and there's really no nonprofit on here, but I know several people who I serve on boards with that um, don't don't want to have things on their website anymore that are going to be scrubbed, and if it says gender or if it says LGBT, there's all kinds of things going on right now that are trying, I think, in some ways to put us back in the closet, or to marginalize the community. And you can imagine that's different in big cities versus
mhm,
smaller cities. So my husband actually runs a community foundation that serves it's underserved populations in the Black and Brown communities in Texas. And you would not believe the number of organizations and what they're facing in many of the cities, the smaller cities in Texas. So
yeah. Yeah, I think for me, I wish my employers, from birth, I have always been the person who was going to say whatever needed to be said. So you could talk to my mom, my grandmother, they were just like always like, he's going to be that kid who's going to call us out. Um, and I still am that person. And I think some of my ability to lead or do what needed to be done in the workplace is because of my identity and the unique challenges that I had experienced growing up. Um, that just gave me this fearless kind of attitude in the workplace, and that is not independent of my skill set. So in the past, I think that there needed to be a level of understanding that because I am this does not negate that. And because I am that does not negate this, that this is all of the package, right? And so a lot of the time they would say, oh, no one else could do that before you got here or interact with this person. And I think it's because of all of the lived experiences, in addition to my identity, that really helped shape those abilities over time, or refine those abilities over time. And so, talking about lived experience, how do you advocate for inclusive policies and culture in your organization? And I'm going to start with Bill here. Um, uh,
So repeat the first part. I didn't hear the first. How do
so
you?
yeah, just talking about lived experience, and you mentioned 40 years of working. How have you advocated for inclusive policies or culture in those different organizations? And then how do you recommend we continue to do that?
Yeah, I think some of it is just leading by example and, being out. And, especially the later part of my career when I was in, C-suite type,
Hmm.
it's very, I had a friend, and let's go back to the 1990s, and one of the ways I came out was his Arthur said, "Bill, people are not going to accept us unless they know us, and so they need to know, who you are, and that you're a gay man, and that you happen to be gay, but that doesn't affect the work that you do or what you what your output is." And he said, unless they know people, it's just going to be that, that devil, or the green-eyed monster or whatever,
Hmm.
until they start to know people. And so that was really an instrumental conversation that I had in the 90s, and really helped me with really starting to come out at work in the 90s. Luckily, like I said, I was accepted at mostly all of my positions, and if I wasn't, I didn't know it. I mean, I don't never felt like there was anyone who, um, had a target on my back. Um, but I thought, as a gay man, I thought it was important to be that leadership, be that role model, and promote that with, human resource activities in within the hospital, and even in my last job that I retired from last year. I mean, there was it was part of it was a Methodist church, Methodist hospital in Dallas, and very accepting of LGBTQ employees. A great place to work. I think it's consistently in the top 100 places to work in the country. Um, so, and I think that again, it's just advocating for people like us. So,
Hmm.
Yeah, so I
Indeed.
would answer in two different directions. Like one
Yeah.
is certainly within my sphere, right? Um, we are really close to Emory's Atlanta campus, and there are certainly students in the School of Theology that are looking for internship placements. And we've
Hmm.
seen ourselves the way that there are teaching hospitals as a teaching congregation, and that we're a place that people can serve a rotation here as an intern and get the experience that they need to pursue their ordination process. And we have seen ourselves for a number of years as being explicitly open for folks that are in the LGBTQ community to serve that space.
Hmm.
Because there are a number of congregations that would feel a little bit more hesitant, I think, and that can be a bottleneck for students that are looking to pursue ordination. At a broader level, I'm a part of a network called the Reconciling Ministries Network that's advocating for uh, full inclusion in the United Methodist Church and in an intersectional way, which is a really interesting project at this in this moment. So inclusion not just around queer identities, but also
Hmm.
around racial, class, varying physical and mental capacities as well. So within the life of the church. So I'm involved with that group. I shook hands with a colleague and we formed the Queer Clergy Caucus of North Georgia last year. And so we're trying to advocate for some of those protective policies that I was talking about earlier within our conference. So as folks come through our ordination process, as folks are serving even in lay capacities in the life of the denomination, that they
Hmm.
know that there's protections, that there's affirmations that the church is embracing and is really taking that as an active stance, not just as a, well, we guess we'll have y'all. We want it to be an active way.
Like that.
And I also
Oh,
have become very active just in the state capitol in Georgia and
okay.
showing up and making my voice heard. I'm pretty tall, and so I'm hard to hide from. And I can find my lawmakers and let them know what I think.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I just to say, I think that's really important. It's kind of like what Arthur, my friend in 1990, told me is that for that you to be visible and people to know you and
Hmm.
see you, especially in the legislature, to see, there's
Yeah.
it's not there's she's a fine person, and that and that I think that goes a long way in set and being an example and being out and letting people see, I'm a minister and I do my job
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
I'm not hurting anybody and I'm not forcing anybody to do anything and I think that's all very important work.
I think
Yeah.
GLAD had a study that something like 70% of Americans would not be able to say that they had ever met a trans person
Hmm.
in person. Now there's always they didn't know they were talking to trans people. There's
Right.
that dynamic too, but there is something about, yeah, how is it that we can show up and be ourselves in public and they won't love us till they know us, right? That's
Right.
Yeah.
the real
Exactly.
thing.
So with that, I think our next question, what advice would you all give to someone early in their career who's unsure about being out at work?
That's a tough one. I think it's
It
a
is a tough one, yeah.
well, it's because it depends on where you are. Like I said
Correct.
before, you've got to in some ways navigate that when you're starting out in a company. In some ways, you should maybe find that out before you take
Hmm.
a position. But if you're living in a small town and there's one bank or whatever that you want where you want to end up living, and it's you've got to be careful navigating that, and as opposed to being just out there right away, and as opposed then to maybe show what kind of work you do, and then come out a little later. But if you're in Dallas, people are gonna that it's not even an issue anymore in most of the places in Dallas. So again, it depends on the situation and where you are.
Yeah.
In my opinion, now somebody else may think just go out and be out there right away. I don't know. I'll let you guys answer. You guys give your response that I'm an older guy and you guys are younger, and so
I think for me, I was thinking I've never been in a work environment where I couldn't be out. Um, and I do think part of your statement is I cognizantly make decisions to not join
right.
places that are not going to be safe. After a while, my first job I just had to take because I needed a job. It just ended up being really great space. And Yeah, I can't think of a time where I wasn't maybe not out on day one because trying to fill them out, and see. But I've had been very fortunate to have really great experiences at all of my places of employment. So I don't know what advice other than what you just said to offer someone, being that my lived experience is a little different. Um, Andy?
Yeah, I do kind of see both sides of this, but I as a as a person that really wrestles with anxiety, and that was a
Hmm.
part of my coming out process is just kind of thinking that like I'd walk into a grocery store and everyone would turn and point and say, "There's one of them," like that kind of thing, which
Yeah.
as it turned out, no one in Kroger cares about about who you are and what you're doing there, right? Everybody's there just to buy
Yeah.
their groceries. And I realized that that was playing out particularly in most communities like Atlanta and I imagine other large cities. Like people are focused on themselves,
Hmm.
that they're not really concerned about you. And on the kind of next layer in, there's a great number of people um, that are actually quite accepting, right? Even if they may not have all the language quite right, I don't know. I kind of have started to lean into giving people an opportunity. Um, I'm giving them a fair shake even before they open their mouth, right? I'm just going to
Yeah.
trust in advance that this is going to be fine, um, rather than starting with anxiety about that. And so far, I mean, some of that is as I was talking about before, the role of being a clergy person and all that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. That many doors are opened that maybe aren't for other folks. But um, if I was really thinking about giving advice to someone, is find a way to be confident in yourself,
Hmm.
and trust that both things are true, that most people aren't really concerned about you, and the vast majority of people are actually in a place of at least wanting to understand. Um,
Yeah.
and despite the headlines and what's happening at broader levels, um, even in more conservative spaces, I have found safe circles, right?
Yeah.
And to trust that you will find that, you know.
Yeah. I think there's a follow-up to this question as well, in the Q&A. So Bill, how did you assess a workplace was safe? Did you mention your identity in interview? Did you make an inside connection? How do you, assess how you're safe?
Yeah, I see the question,
Yeah.
and uh, I most of it was in, especially later, my last two roles. I was just out. I would talk about my husband, Ron, and I've been together 25 years, and it was just that was just part of the mantra. If I got asked, what anything something personal about myself, I talk about my husband, and
Hmm.
so and that was typically in the interviews. Early on in my career, obviously, I didn't because, and, we're talking about the late '80s, and really, I wasn't even totally true to myself yet then when I graduated from Emory. So, but yeah, and I've done the writer says something about making an inside connection, and I did have inside connections. In several of the positions where I was, knew somebody or knew that it was already a gay friendly or LGBTQ friendly institution. But so yeah, some of that would be doing that homework up front about the organization, if you have that ability to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I think when I went to work at Coca-Cola, I knew they had ERGs. I knew people who worked there. Um, I and then I always tell people I have a little test anyway, kind of. I shouldn't do this, but I'll wear like my Apple Rainbow band the first couple of weeks to see how people respond to that, or um, but that's already when I'm there. When I'm in the interview, I'm asking cultural questions that I would ask of any place, like, how are you supportive of? Do you guys do X, Y, and Z? You can see a lot from people's benefits, like who they allow from insurance standpoints. There was a time where Emory didn't cover everyone either, and we worked on that as well. So just different things. Like that, a lot of Googling, honestly, and then a lot of intuition when you actually meet the people and go through the interviews. Yeah. I do want to open it up, Dominique, for Q&A because I know we're at 12:50 and we kind of allotted 5, 10 minutes for that. So, um,
Absolutely, I agree. I haven't seen too many questions, but we did just get one in. It says, "Can Bill or Ron speak to how they
oh
assess?"
yeah, we
We
Oh,
answered
got
all
yes,
that.
that.
yes.
Yeah, yeah, we
Let me
were.
let me double check. Okay, yeah, the other ones are just comments. So, you guys that are attending, if you have any other questions, if you want to drop them in the Q&A real quick, but we might be okay.
Okay, I
Keep
mean, I
an eye
have a
on it.
couple of more for the group. I think the one that I would like to kind of round out the conversation is what's a moment you felt especially proud or affirmed in your identity work?
I would go back to something I said earlier. Just not even thinking I was doing anything proactively at when I was at Baylor St. Luke's in Houston. Um, just the amount of support I got from folks that were felt like they were now able to come out because there was a openly gay man in the senior
Mm,
suite of it's in the first one that as far as we knew, and it was and they saw where it was totally accepted by the leadership as well. And I just think from years of being in the closet or worrying about whether they would be terminated, and then they see a leader who is openly gay, has his husband at events, um, and but not to be, I'm proud of that, but I wasn't that wasn't the intent in doing it.
mhm,
But it's one of the things when I think back that it kind of was freeing to several. I mean, we had I don't remember how many thousands of employees in the organization, and so it was kind of like a freeing thing for those individuals to say, "Oh, I can if Bill's out, I can be out."
mhm.
So
Andy?
So, I've had a number of experiences just in the last couple of years that have been really affirming, but the one that's just really recent is I helped to write a kind of worship curriculum resource for the United Women of Faith, which is it used to be called United Methodist Women, and they changed their name.
Mm,
That's what it is. It's the women's ministry group in our denomination, and um, because I wrote that, and that was for a national audience, the crowd in this conference, like in North Georgia, invited me to come and to preach to their annual gathering. And that was just real affirming, just to be in this space with a lot of women, and many of whom I knew from the before times, and so they were embracing me and welcoming me in, and just letting me do the thing that I'm called to do, and
mm.
I just felt really welcomed and affirmed, and that was exciting.
I love that. I think for me, my most recent role at FDA was directing the lab, and I had several colleagues come and tell me stories about their out children or their brothers or their sisters, and it was really heartwarming to just have those regular conversations in that workspace. And then the second part was when everything was happening, I told everyone they're going to leave their pronouns and these posters are going to stay up on this wall until someone comes in and makes me take them down. Um, and they're still there because no one was visiting FDA in Atlanta to tell us to take this stuff down or to remove email signatures. So I thought that was silly. Um, we do have a couple more questions in the chat. So the first one is the cultural climate is terrifying right now for many, particularly those of us in the LGBTQ plus community. How do we protect our peace and set boundaries to prevent burnout or harm?
that's a tough one since
Good.
I'm not in the workforce right now. Uh, and it's and I guess there's just so many unknowns still too. I mean, you hear something one day and then the next day it's something different. And
Hmm.
I think some people say that chaos is a strategy for some of some of those in charge right now. And I just think, I mean, if I was, and I would just continue to do my job and be who I am. And, uh, you know, when the question has to set boundaries, I'm not sure exactly what that means at at work, but um, and definitely if you ever have, and if you have harm, I mean, that's a single signal that you probably don't need to be in that environment, and
Hmm.
maybe we should look for something else. But yeah, it's we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I don't want to get too political, but just every day it seems like there's something that could be harmful to those of us who are um, can at times be marginalized.
And just to piggyback off that, like the language that I would use is to find the things and the practices and the people that help you. Um, you were talking about the question talks about protecting your
Hmm.
peace, and I would kind of uh, mirror that and say to to preserve your joy or
Hmm.
to remind you of your joy. And that looks different for different folks, right? Some folks, uh, you know, have a craft, have a hobby, that kind of thing. For me, I am a person that feels recharged in nature. And so when the rest of the world is like on fire or whatever, I have a sort of small world. And that's like being able to go to my garden or to go on
Hmm.
a walk in the park and to be in the trees and move my body and feel alive and be with my children, be with my partner, like do these things that help me remember who I am and why I am alive. And that courage helps me to preserve my peace in the face of all of the bananagram stuff that's kind of swirling around. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think for me, I will give a quick um, I was doing all the things. So I was meditating, I was walking in the park, I was praying, I was cycling, I was running, I was lifting weights, and nothing seemed like it was working. And so it was, as Bill said, kind of removing myself from the harmful situation is really what helped me most recently. Um, I think the other part to the protecting your peace and setting boundaries is what we talked about, I think, before people jumped on. For me, was creating structure in my day. So I can control when I wake up. I can control when I go to sleep. I can control what I eat. I can control the cleanliness of my space. And so really leaning into the things that I can control for me personally, and not focusing on the things that I can't control and really structuring in breaks, even during this job search process where you feel like you should be looking for a job 24/7, um, has helped so much to prevent burnout and even harm. And then I think this question is for Dominique, if I understand this. How can we be active in LGBT initiatives at Emory as an alumni?
What a great question, and thank you for asking. So many ways, and we're working on them every day. But the number one thing, honestly, is just spreading awareness about what we have going on, events-wise, announcements, information about the university, but especially volunteering. We love when you guys volunteer. And again, I want to shout out to this amazing panel today. You guys have been doing a phenomenal job, and you are so appreciated. But this entire event, for example, it's a volunteer opportunity. So we love volunteering and honestly just getting feedback from you all as well as alum, like what kind of events do you want to see? What kind of topics do you guys want to talk about? Where are we missing the mark? Where can we bridge the gap in what we're already doing and what we should be doing? So
Mhm.
those are some ways you guys can get involved and you can reach out to me anytime. If there's something you would like to participate in or help out with, it is much appreciated.
And just to dovetail on that real quickly, I know our time is up, but the LGBTQ Impact Circle there is alums who actually are donating money to
Mhm.
LGBTQ initiatives, and we had our first grant session this past spring, and funded, I think it was 6 or 7 initiatives that came in from current students, alumni, and even professors or people who work at Emory to do initiatives on campus. One of them was theology related, as well as getting LGBTQ theologians from Candler together, and there's a grant that they'll receive starting September 1st. So
Exactly. So we
That's awesome.
are putting in the work and we're trying to get in the field. And the more that you guys help out, the better, honestly. So Yeah, so we are at time. I want to say thank you to the panel again. You guys were amazing. We appreciate your feedback and your transparency, and I would love to work with you again. For all the attendees, thank you all again for being here as well. And please reach out if you have any questions or want more information about the Emory Impact Circles who presented this event today. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
Too. Thank you guys so much. Good meeting you guys.
Thank you.